Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Let me start by just asking you, in all your years of service, have you ever seen a case like this?
Well, certainly, we had a case in Greater Manchester which involved a nurse at the Stepping Hill Hospital, which was an incredibly complex investigation. At that point, when the hospital came to us, they had no idea who might be harming, in this case, elderly patients, and it was the most challenging investigation and complex investigation. But certainly, a case like this, where a nurse who obviously has joined the profession to care for the most vulnerable, for in this calculated way to be killing babies. There have been cases, like this, in the past, but they are so incredibly rare. And in a way, that makes it more difficult, for hospital managers to identify this, and really then for detectives to go about their work, because it's also an area where there's, very little research, where the science may not be absolutely definite. And therefore, investigators have to wade through all this, try and make sense of sometimes conflicting medical evidence. And they are the most enormous investigations. And I can only really pay tribute to the detectives of Cheshire Constabulary for what has must been, an incredible job, not only harrowing in terms of the cases and having to deal with the parents, but as I say, just getting their heads around really complex medical, information. And then often finding, as I say, that when you go and see experts, they may conflict, they may not be absolutely sure, and it's an area which there hasn't been a huge amount of research. And so, as I say, I think they have done a tremendous job to gain these convictions. And really, as Danny Shaw said earlier, this is actually a tribute to the jury system, because it's quite clear the jury have taken huge care in understanding the evidence, making sense of it. They've really taken their time. And that shows how important the jury system is. And indeed, that jury members take their responsibility incredibly seriously.
I mean, you talk about how difficult it is to gather the evidence. In the cold light of day, when you read the cases, clearly there are elements that recur throughout this. I talked about these air emboluses, which seem to appear on multiple occasions, also about suffocation, the use of the nasogastric tube. But again, I've worked in these hospitals, so it's very difficult if you are a clinician, if you're dealing with individual patients where you have a baby that you believe is getting better, you then go off shift and then something happens to that baby where the baby starts to deteriorate. It is incredibly difficult to work out why the baby is deteriorating, and that must be part of the reason why it's been so difficult to gather that evidence.
That's actually right. But you've also got to bear in mind that, what will be the information and the way of working for medical professionals is quite different from that of detectives having to prove a case beyond all reasonable doubt. And absolutely comply, with the laws of the presentation of evidence in the criminal court. And therefore, I'm sure there'll be members of the public, viewers, saying, well, it was obvious, how could it all be, an enormous coincidence? But, you can't present something as a coincidence in a criminal court. You have to prove individual case. You can absolutely use similar fact evidence, but there are strict rules about that. And obviously, in this case, as in other cases, the jury had to look at every single charge, look at the evidence, and decide whether it was proven or not proven. And that particular factor that you talk about there, about people injecting air into a baby's vein, as I understand it, it's not terribly well researched, that action, because it's obviously not a normal medical action or something that somebody would do. And so, again, I'm sure the detectives have had to work really hard to understand that. And that's why it takes so long to get to court. We've obviously had COVID as well, and a huge backlog in the criminal system. But as well, in this sort of investigation, there is a huge amount of evidence to be gathered, to be worked through, and you have to go and ask a whole series of medical experts, academics, to review it, and then you have to put it in front of specialist barristers, again, who understand this type of evidence, to get to a stage where you can get those sorts of charges. And all that time, clearly, the family is going through absolute hell in terms of trying to understand why their baby died. But that's why it's taken so long. But I would say that they clearly have done a good job. The jury have done a good job. The prosecution team have done a good job. And it's just really good that this woman is behind bars where she cannot harm, little children ever again.
But as you say, of course, it's very difficult to bring justice in a case like this. Clearly, this happened between 2015 and 2016. The police painstakingly went through all of these cases. It took 2 years to gather enough evidence to bring this to court. And I would agree, I think the police have done an excellent job in trying to join those dots and proving beyond reasonable doubt what had happened in this. So in terms of the case, is this the most complex case that you have ever seen?
I don't know. It's hard to judge. Certainly the one that we had in Stepping Hill Hospital was incredibly complex for similar reasons around trying to understand, in this case, why very elderly, frail people died and sorting out, was that because of an intervention by a particular nurse, or was it due to just the fact that they were towards the end of their life? So these are very, very complex cases. It was obviously very, very complex in terms of people like Harold Shipman. Whenever you've got a medical professional who often can cover their own tracks, but you're also, as I say, trying to understand medical procedure and medical science. These are incredibly complex cases. And would also say that in the criminal process, you not only have to prove that, the evidence that somebody has done it, but you also have to go through all the evidence which might suggest that somebody has not done it. And you find anything which, it may be in the defendant's favour, that has to be disclosed to the defence. So, all that adds to the complexity of working that out. And obviously now the investigating team are going to review lots of other cases at this particular hospitals and other hospitals where this woman worked to see, if anything else like this has happened. So their work continues.
So, Peter Fahey, thank you very much indeed for your time.